Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention at the front of the room, please. The score at the Junction Oval, Victoria won the toss, selected to bat 1 for 87 at lunch in the Shield final. Marcus Harris is unbeaten on 46. There are shadows of Kevin Roberts in Australian cricket's rich archives. There's a scorecard of an Australian youth team touring the UK that includes the names Damien Martin, Adam Gilchrist, Michael Kaspovich and Greg Blewitz. There's the image of an uncapped 21-year-old in the slips at a Sheffield Shield final for New South Wales as the 13th man. There's a player profile in the print archives that gives voice to an ambition to one day captain New South Wales. And if you know what you're looking for on YouTube, there's a heavily silhouetted vision of a batsman determinedly slapping on his pads and lowering his helmet and taking his bat out like a sheath, while the voiceover speaks of warriors that have always taken to the field of battle to contest domestic cricket's greatest prize. It's a role reserved for the player just anonymous enough to be the everyman of the circuit. And when the light is right and the angle just so, you can make out New South Wales hopeful Kevin Roberts. ESPN Cricinfo keeps the official records, 23 first-class matches, more than 1,000 runs, and a century that was doubtless the fulfilling of many a dream, and 18 domestic one-dayers also, including a ton. 4 summers wasn't quite enough to graduate to leadership. Mind you, the presence of Mark Taylor and Steve Waugh through that time did nothing to help the cause. But his captaincy came through industry at Adidas and at the Colorado Group and at 2XU before cricket drew him back, first to the board of Cricket Australia and then into the executive. He came to the position of chief executive in October, still amidst what history will doubtless confirm as the greatest crisis the game has known in this country. It remains with its echoes and the threads that are still to be tied up. On behalf of the Melbourne Press Club, would you please make welcome the Chief Executive of Cricket Australia, Kevin Roberts.
Thanks, Gerard, for those kind words. I've got to say, it's a whole lot easier being on the receiving end of that introduction than it is being on the receiving end of your probing questions in our regular interviews, Gerard. But thank you. It's a real privilege to represent cricket here today, and I'm grateful for the invitation to join you. So thank you, Mark, for your invitation to be here. Sir Donald Bradman once said that it's our duty to leave the game in a better state than what we found it in when we were first involved in it. And being true to that duty in my role involves driving significant change. So at other times in cricket's history, you might think that change mightn't have been a key part of the agenda. But when you have everyone from your chairman to your national coaches and captains, right through to your receptionist, to the coach of our twin daughters under 10 team at Glen Iris, who are wanting change in the game, it makes my job a whole lot easier. Their attitude and their support actually makes my job possible. In our respective roles as Chairman and CEO of Cricket Australia, Earl Eddings and I are acutely aware that some of the change that cricket needs in this country is about a return to traditional principles, and some of it is about Cricket Australia becoming a more contemporary organisation. We both believe passionately in the role that state and territory cricket associations play in the cricket landscape. We really want states and territories to have a strong sense of identity in Australian cricket. And we also believe passionately in returning to having greater focus on the importance of domestic competitions in Australian cricket. So state and territory CEOs, for the first time in December, became part of what's now known as the Australian Cricket Leadership Team, which really symbolises the way that we're starting to work together as a more united sport. We're also in the process of recruiting an executive in high performance whose sole priority will be to be joined at the hip with states and territories in the running of domestic competitions and in developing the talent of the future. This time last year, less than 30% of Cricket Australia's executive team were in their current roles. And now almost half of that team is represented by women. Looking back over that last year, of course it's a year since the Cape Town incident rocked our sport and rocked our nation. And I know it's the reason that some of you have attended the lunch here today. So I'm here to talk about that, but I'm also here to talk about the growth of cricket over the generations and through the decades, and the growth of cricket through crises, large and small, and the way that cricket is such an important part of the fabric of our Australian culture. What happened in Cape Town affected us all, didn't it? We woke up to it on a Sunday morning and saw images that we couldn't quite believe. On the Monday morning, my car was in for service, so I caught the train to work. I carry a Cricket Australia backpack with me most days, so I had it on me that day. And as I sat down in the train, I could see the man sitting opposite me looking down at the backpack, or in that direction anyway. And so that caused me to look down. And I guess to my surprise, because I didn't do it consciously, I had the backpack turned around backwards so that the Cricket Australia logo was facing me and couldn't be seen by anyone else on that train. It was the first time in my life that I wasn't proud to be part of the sport that I'd loved since I could walk. And that was representative of the effect that that incident had on so many Australians. I kept the logo turned towards me because I was embarrassed to be a part of it and didn't want anyone to know. Following on from that, the week that followed the incident, our receptionists at Cricket Australia, at the time we had Bree and Elise on reception, they received about 500 phone calls from fans who were absolutely disgusted about what they'd seen in Cape Town. But they fielded a delivery of a much better kind the next week when Cameron Bancroft, who is a young man of character, sent them both a bunch of flowers and a handwritten apology for what he'd put them through. So there's so many human stories behind what we witnessed in Cape Town last year. But who would have thought that one of the most powerful ones that would involve the receptionists at Cricket Australia? Cricket matters to Australia, doesn't it? The first ever test match, of course, was played up the road at the MCG back in 1877 between Australia and the touring England team. Australia had appointed 10 test captains by the time Sir Edmund Barton was unveiled as our first Prime Minister. And ever since then, the captaincy of the Australian men's team, of course, has been positioned on that pedestal alongside our Prime Ministers. And it's fair to say when that role maintains such lofty heights over such a long period of time, that is such a long way to fall, further to fall than any other Australian sportsman or woman. So cricket has survived and thrived through many crises in its lifetime, and it will do it again. Of course, 1932-33, we had the infamous bodyline series where the English bowling attack targeted the bodies of the Australian batters, particularly Don Bradman, and with some success. Now, the ill will was such during that particular series that it escalated to the highest levels of both of the nation's governments, to the extent that there was talk of a trade boycott being imposed on English goods by the Australian government of the day. But bodyline was subsequently banned, as you would know, and it made cricket better. It protected the safety of cricket's players as well. Fast forward to 1977, and of course we had Kerry Packer, who hadn't secured the broadcast rights to international cricket in Australia at that time, so responded by establishing the rebel league, if you like, of World Series cricket. What a crisis that was at the time. But think about what that ultimately did for the game. It introduced coloured clothing. It brought a new audience to the game. It saw the game played under lights for the first time. And now, over 40 years on, the men's and women's Big Bash are doing just the same thing, aren't they? Bringing new audiences to the game, taking the game into the future and attracting new fans. So what are the lessons learned over the last year? It's absolutely right to say that Steve Smith, Dave Warner and Cameron Bancroft have paid a heavy price for their mistakes. Some would argue too heavy, and they're entitled to that view. We had an independent review of Cricket Australia by the Ethics Centre, and I can tell you that was seriously confronting. But I can also tell you that it was critically important and it was embraced by Cricket Australia as an organisation that is really sincere about being the best that we can be and about improving every day. Our highest priority now is rebuilding trust. Such a common theme in the world of 2019, isn't it? But rebuilding trust both within and around cricket. We've seen tangible change at the board level, at the executive level. We've got a new Australian men's coach, or relatively new, and a relatively new Australian men's test captain. There's some of the tangible changes, but much more importantly, the really important intangible change is that we are now very, very clear about what we stand for. Everything that we do now at Cricket Australia is about uniting and inspiring communities through cricket. Whether that's the local cricket club that we all love as the heart and soul of our community, whether it's the community of fans at the MCG or the SCG or another venue around the country who are celebrating the game and its players, or whether it's an international social media community of 25 million people around the world following Australian cricket. Everything we do is about uniting and inspiring communities through cricket. On the field, our men's and women's teams have committed to making Australians proud. They've actually committed to doing that off the field as well. And like all teams in professional sport, some of you have heard me say before, our goal will always be to win because it's professional sport. But what's changed is we now have a non-negotiable expectation that we compete with respect. And that is the thing that matters most. That is the thing that's going to make Australians more proud than anything. So Steve Smith, Dave Warner, Cam Bancroft, they've owned their mistakes, they've paid a price, they've served their time. And I'm here to tell you they've all made genuine contributions to their local cricket communities. You've only got to speak to the people at Sutherland Cricket Club where Steve grew up and still plays and actually coaches on occasions now. Or the people at Randwick Petersham Cricket Club who will tell you what an outstanding role model Dave Warner has been through this season. And there's been progress despite these pitfalls as well. I'll always remember this season for two things. Firstly, the outstanding performance of Australia's women's team in winning the T20 World Cup in the West Indies and the way that they went about it. I'll also remember this season as being the season when the Australian men's team started to reconnect with the Australian public. Over 2 million people attended the cricket this year. That number would have been less than 1 million earlier this decade. And many millions more watched the game on TV, while participation in our game is at record levels. Let me be clear, we didn't get everything right this season either. I guess we're human and we'll keep working on further improvements. But what I'm really proud of is that we finished this season much, much better than the way that we started. I'd like to acknowledge Justin Langer and the Australian men's team in particular for the way that they've turned around their fortunes since that Cape Town incident that rocked our nation. They started the season tentatively against South Africa, for any of you who saw the early T20 matches back around October. Unsurprisingly, the Australian men's team didn't really know if they had permission to compete and compete hard after what had happened, ironically, in South Africa against the same opposition just a few months earlier. Fast forward to the Indian Test series, we were up against the world's premier Test team. And our men did themselves proud by competing really well most days against that best team in the world through the Indian Test series and gave the Indians a real run for their money. The team then performed really strongly against Sri Lanka, dominating that 2-test series that saw a bunch of new or maiden Test centurions. And of course, they've been outstanding in the recent tour against India and the tour against Pakistan, as Gerard noted, 3-0 up in that series right now. And in the recent series against India, a 5-match one-day series, it's the first time in the history of Australian cricket that any of our teams have come back from 2-0 down to win a 5-match one-day series. So this team is starting to do some pretty special things. Speaking of special things, the Australian women's team is exemplary in every way, aren't they? On and off the field. If you look at the way that they're role models, not just for girls, but boys right across the country. They're the number 1 ranked team in the world. They've won 17 of their last 18 matches. And just think for a moment about the way they've gone about it. Again, it's not so much about the victories, it's about the way they've gone about it. They've competed with respect for themselves, their families, their opposition, and the game that we all love. When the women won the T20 World Cup just a few months ago in the West Indies, it was the 4th time in 8 years that they'd lifted that particular trophy. And what a great achievement that was. Now, behind those team performances, there's so many individual stories and many other positives behind that. We had over 40 million viewers watch the BBL this season. For the first time ever, over 40 million viewers. The WBBL is the 4th most watched sports league in our country, behind only the AFL, the NRL and the BBL. There's no other L's in there, it's enough. The 4th most watched sports league in our country. It comprehensively outrates, so the WBBL comprehensively outrates Super Rugby and A-League soccer in Australia. We're the first sport in Australia to commit to gender pay equity, and we're particularly proud of that. Behind the scenes, you often hear the question, maybe from your local barista, now that the season's done, what do you guys do? There's a whole lot of planning for next season that has to happen, because in the season just gone, Cricket Australia put on and hosted 613 matches at international and domestic level across Australia. So what a workload that is behind the scenes. And the funding from our new broadcast agreements, while not perfect for every Australian, and we understand that, the funding from those broadcast agreements enabled the employment of 70 new staff on the ground in community cricket, working for state and territory associations around the country to serve volunteers who are the lifeblood of our sport. There's so much cricket to look forward to in the remainder of 2019. We've got the men's 50 over World Cup starting at the end of May over in England. We've got Damien Fleming here today, of course, who was part of the victorious Australian team last time England hosted the World Cup back in 1999. And our current men's team is gaining momentum as the tournament draws closer. So who knows what might happen come July 14 at Lord's when the World Cup final is played. Alongside that, of course, we've got the Women's Ashes starting at Grace Road in Leicester on the 2nd of July and running through that month, overlapping slightly with the Men's Ashes. And what an interesting series that will be, and no doubt a hard-fought one, and hopefully one that will see us bring the Ashes home from England for the first time in many years. Next year, as many of you know, we're hosting the Women's and then the Men's T20 World Cups in Australia. So please join us for the final of the Women's event on International Women's Day at the MCG next year. And if you choose to do that on the 8th of March, you'll be part of our efforts to achieve world record attendance at a women's sporting event. Now, I may not have been proud of cricket a year ago, but I can tell you that I stand before you today just so proud of the sport that we love. And we are just so committed to uniting and inspiring communities through cricket. And thanks for having us here today.
If you stay there, Kevin, we'll field some questions. I'll sit here for the eye line of TV. Mark Taylor spoke of the grey area, former board member. He spoke there was no probe into finding out how long it had been going on for in regard to the ball tampering. Are you entitled to ask for the trust of the public without fully coming clean on what that men's team had done prior to Cape Town?
It's challenging, isn't it? One of the great things about our game is the passionate commentary in the public domain by everyone, including former players and Mark Taylor specifically. And we obviously addressed the Cape Town issue. Over recent months, we've also made a very strong point of reminding all players, all staff, all player agents and other people in the cricket community that if they've got any concerns about ball tampering or any concerns about any integrity issue in the game, we've invited them to report that through our anonymous integrity hotline or through other means that are available to them. We haven't had any such reports. And so we won't jump at shadows, but I can tell you that if anyone does report concerns about any integrity matter from prior ball tampering or whatever it may be, we're serious about addressing that. We have a process to address it, but as you'd appreciate, Gerard, we're not going to jump at shadows or speculation. We'll deal with the facts.
Do you know whether Mark expressed that view at the board table, that the probe should have been broader and should have answered the gaping question?
I don't know whether he did.
Should he have?
I guess that's a matter for Mark. Again, we're really serious about addressing any unresolved issues and we're sincere in the way that we're going about that. So if there are any reports or allegations as opposed to innuendo, then we will investigate that thoroughly.
Acknowledging that you weren't the chief executive at the time, was the Ian Roy probe set up to be don't ask, don't tell, just deal with what's on camera?
No, not at all. Not at all. Certainly, the investigation needed to be conducted swiftly. We needed to fulfil a commitment to field a team against South Africa, I should say, the following week. And we didn't know whether we'd need to fly 11 new players in to field that team or no new players in. Obviously, the ultimate answer was somewhere in between. And so the investigation was absolutely fit for purpose. But as I say, we haven't rested on those laurels. We've made repeated and extensive invitations to anyone to report any integrity matters or concerns about ball tampering ever since.
So do you know, Kevin, whether previously in that South African tour or in the home summer against England, whether the Australian team tampered with the ball?
All the evidence we have suggests that that was the first time that sandpaper had come out. We know that, ironically, the condition of the ball was unaffected, and that's the sad irony of it all. But all of the evidence suggests that's the first time that a foreign object such as that had been used. And again, we don't have any suggestions from either the ICC match officials or broadcaster footage or players, player agents, Cricket Australia staff, cricket fans, no one has made any allegations of any other inappropriate goings-on before that.
Do you suspect that there's a lingering public sentiment that absolutely believes that that was the culmination of a pattern of behaviour rather than a single moment of madness?
Look, what's really clear is the extent to which the public were genuinely affected by what they saw. When you've grown up in a country and with a game where there's a saying that it's just not cricket, I can understand that millions of Australians were so hurt by that event. And people understandably respond in their own way, and that's authentic to them, and it's not for me to question how they do respond. All I can say is that we have made extensive efforts to address this issue. In terms of our own code of conduct, we've made that a whole lot more onerous. Obviously, it's manageable for players. If it's not manageable, then it's pretty pointless and theoretical. It's manageable for players, but largely through the strength of the sanctions handed down for bringing the game into disrepute, the ICC Cricket Committee has extended or increased the penalties for ball tampering in international cricket, and I'm not sure that would have happened without Australia's involvement. So, again, whilst we're not perfect, we can be proud of that impact.
Do you think there's a risk, you speak about rebuilding public trust, is if it did come to light at any stage that more than 3 people knew within that team, or that it was proven that it did happen previously, whether it's sandpaper or not, that you would shatter that rebuilt trust?
There's no doubt that that would affect the way that cricket fans and the general public views cricket, that's for sure. I suppose we're dealing with the what is, if you like, rather than the what ifs. We could jump at shadows, we could overreact to innuendo. If facts come to light, we'll be addressing those. And if that means that there's issues for us in the short term because we do the right thing, then so be it, because it'll benefit the integrity and the reputation of the sport that we love in the long term.
You speak of a team that's gaining momentum. Is to look at this team by the end of India and in the UAE is to see a team that is harmonious, is happy and is united in purpose, which is not to be underestimated given the 12 months. Do you worry that at the precise moment when the team looks like it has moved on and it has found its way, that Australia will reintegrate 2 suspended players and risk severe disruption to what has been rebuilt?
I don't mean to sound flippant, Gerard, but if you said that, take the names out of it, if you said that you had an Australian one-day team with fantastic momentum who might just surprise everyone in England, and you've still got 2 players who are eligible to return to that team, one of whom is a once-in-a-lifetime player and one of whom is a once every decade or 2 player. What a good challenge to have. So, as I say, I don't want to be flippant about that because we're really committed to ensuring that harmony continues to build rather than to be impacted, and hence our efforts in the background to support both Steve and Dave to be ready to be eligible for selection, and also supporting all of the players in the team and Justin, who've done such a brilliant job at reconnecting with the public. We're committed to that continuing. So I'll go glass half full and say it's a good problem to have right now.
Yeah. Do you worry about this team has moved on? I don't think there's any question about it, and Justin Langer has done an amazing job, as you rightly point out, to help it move on, that you actually drag them back at precisely the moment where they've figured out who they are and what they're doing.
This is the moment when I'd repeat what I said in the intro. That was a whole lot easier than facing your questions. But no, in all seriousness, Gerard, I'm not particularly concerned about that. The Justin, the leadership of the Test team and the white ball teams in the form of Tim and Aaron, they've had, as we know, just about a year. Not quite in the case of Justin, but the best part of a year. And they spent a long time together, a lot of time on the road. That's a whole lot more intense than turning up to a radio station or an office to work with your colleagues. So, you know, a year of this rebuild and a year of doing that together as a team in sport is probably like 3 years in the business world or the media or some other realm. So I'm not concerned, but we are very focused about ensuring that that positive momentum continues.
Do you think in the Warner case in particular, the public is ready to embrace a man who has been divisive and abrasive by design, I think it should be said? Do you think the public, who you say are re-embracing the cricket team, I think that's the experience, is by putting the figure very specifically of Dave Warner back in there, that it risks that building, well, the goodwill?
Yeah, there's obviously contrasting views, isn't there, among cricket fans, perhaps of different generations, different genders, different attitudes. And there's not one universal view towards Dave Warner or towards any player, is there? You know, it's the source of rich debate at these functions or down at the local cricket club as to who should be selected in a team or, who plays with the spirit of cricket and so on. So there won't be a universal view on that. There's a lot of people who are of the view that Dave has served his time. As I said, if you speak to the people down at Randwick Petersham Cricket Club, they'll say he's been outstanding as a servant of the game over the last year in their local community. And I accept that there's other people who don't agree that Dave should be eligible for selection again. So I guess the reality of that is that like a lot of the decisions that we make in cricket where there's such passion and we love the passion, we won't be able to keep everyone happy, but we'll do our best to do what we think is right.
We'll take some questions from the floor. Maybe if we start in the back corner and just sort of work our way through the room. So if you do have a question, Dan, or will we just pop your hand up? Hey, if Adam Zampa had man-catted Virat Kohli, for instance, a few weeks ago, what do you think would have happened? Do you think you would have needed an emergency flight to get an Australian cricketer out of India if the roles had been vaguely reversed?
I guess what we would have done, and per my earlier comments, Gerard, we're very clear about what we stand for now. So the players stand for making Australians proud. So if you run it through that lens, it's pretty clear that something like that wouldn't make Australians proud. If we talk about on and off the field, our commitment to cricket communities, to bring them together, and for the players and others in the game to inspire them, would that have done that? No way. So we've got two very clear mechanisms now, two very clear, I guess, decision-making guides that would have made it quite easy to address an issue like that, whereas a year ago that wouldn't have been so easy for us because we didn't have those principles in place.
So you're a no to the man-cad?
Not a fan.
John.
Kevin, John Pierrick from The Age. Just a quick question on the Longstaff review. There were 42 recommendations that came out of that post the ball tampering affair. Just wondering where things are at in terms of those recommendations being enforced.
Thanks, John. Yeah, we've got a team working with stakeholders around Australian cricket, including the ACA, state and territory cricket associations, who are working on the implementation of those recommendations. So Earl led a board meeting of Cricket Australia 13 days ago, I think was our last board meeting. This was an important item on the agenda where we put the status of the implementation up to let the board know where we were up to seek guidance on next steps and the principles that we'd use to work collaboratively with the ACA, who we had dinner with the night before the board meeting to discuss that and various other matters, and to work with state and territory associations as well. So pretty soon you'll be seeing updates on the status of implementation on the likes of the Cricket Australia website. It's not there just yet, and I don't have a precise date by when that will be up, but I can tell you it'll be weeks rather than months.
Dan?
Kevin, Dan Breddick from ESPN Cricket Info. In terms of the events of a year ago, what measure of discussion or control has Cricket Australia got over people involved at the time, whether they were members of the team or staff, speaking publicly about what happened 12 months ago, perhaps outside the terms of that specific investigation that took place?
Yeah, Dan, I guess all current and former employees, like any organisation, have confidentiality obligations. That's not Cricket Australia being heavy-handed. I'm sure most people in the room here have had a look at your own employment agreements and such clauses in them, so there's nothing unusual about that. At the same time, we don't want to control or muzzle people in cricket. The richness of debate in cricket is fantastic. You know, look at the other day, two of cricket's most esteemed journalists, hopefully not within arm's reach. No, they've got Andrew Wu between them. Greg Baum and Gideon Haigh are diametrically opposed in their view towards player names and numbers on test shirts, and they're equally entitled to their differing views. So we embrace that passion, we embrace that debate, whether it be a reporter who we respect like Gideon or Greg, or whether it be people involved in cricket in other capacities. So I guess it's a balance. We all need to respect our confidentiality obligations, but we also need to make sure that we're being fair income towards this notion that we want to enable and empower people in cricket rather than control. And I guess it's not always simple to walk that fine line, but certainly it's something that we try to do.
Andrew? Just move your hand up on the mic, will you? See that.
Andrew Wu, Sydney Morning Herald. You spoke before about David Warner and how there's a divided opinion in the public as to whether he should or should not play for Australia again. What's your understanding of the relationship David has with the players within the cricket team now, and whether those relationships have been patched to enable him to come back into the side without affecting the harmony within the team now?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I've been asked that question a bunch of times recently. And Dave Warner obviously trained with the New South Wales team, for example, for a good chunk of the last season. So had a whole lot of interaction with other players. He's got interest outside cricket with the likes of Mitchell Starc as part of the bowling group. So it's not as though there aren't existing relationships there or relationships that remain from when Dave was playing in the team up until Cape Town. I guess what we're really focused on is doing everything we can to support Dave, Steve, Cameron, and all of the other players and support staff with this integration. And to Gerard's point, to build harmony rather than to disrupt the harmony that is building. And at the same time, let's be open about it. In any workplace, we don't need to be best mates with everyone that we work with. There needs to be a foundation of respect, absolutely. And I think there's growing respect there, and we'll continue to support the players with the right discussions and work those through to continue building respect in those relationships. As to whether every player in the men's team or in the women's team is best mates with the rest of their teammates, it's not far different to any other workplace where you'll have some very close friendships, some cordial relationships, and some that are a bit more challenging. But I don't see it being beyond the realms of any other workplace.
Just the microphones at the back, if you just make yourself known. I know there's a question from Kilvington Grammar over here in the corner as the mic gets there. Just before it does, the Shield final is today. Kevin, have you been a long-time supporter of the Shield final? Has it got through the debate as to whether it's an anachronism?
I think it has got through. I know Earl's a big fan of the Shield final. I am too. Scheduling is a challenge in cricket, as we know. It's a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, I guess, between international cricket and domestic cricket, then on the men's and women's side. However many dimensions that is, it's probably 4, isn't it, if I can count. So it's a challenging jigsaw puzzle. And it was a live discussion 2 to 3 years ago as to the role that the Shield final plays in Australian cricket. And I think there was perhaps a strategic view or a strategic question as to what value does the match add to the Australian cricket landscape. But I guess I came at it from a more emotional perspective, that the vast majority of professional cricketers in Australia aren't quite good enough to play for their country at senior level. And having been one of them, I really empathise with the fact that a Shield final could be the pinnacle of their career. As you said, I fielded in a Shield final as 13th man as a 21-year-old, and I've still got great memories of that. And so we decided that it was really important to keep the Shield final, but what the issue was really around the playing conditions. We've seen some poor quality Shield finals, long drawn matches that weren't really played with what we probably have come to know as the Australian spirit, if you like, whereas with a new set of playing conditions and incentives for scoring runs and taking wickets, unless 3 or 4 of the match days are washed out in the next few days, we'll have a winner of this match if it's a draw because of the point system rewarding runs scored, wickets taken, etc. So I'm a big fan of the final being retained. I know I speak for Earl and his view agreeing with that, and I'd suggest it's here to stay, and it's how we keep making the playing conditions relevant to the match.
Kilvington Grammar.
Daisy from Kilvington Grammar. Do you think, because the women's number one, do you think they'll ever top men's cricket?
What a great question. Thanks, Daisy, and thanks to you guys for coming along today. And that'd be a fantastic aspiration, wouldn't it really? I'm sure you think that. And I'm sure my 5 daughters who are at school today couldn't come along for a free lunch. I'm sure they think that. We know that the Australian men's team is often being called the shop window, if you like, or the thing that is the highest profile in cricket. And we love that. We love the profile of the men's team and the profile it's had for many decades. We've got a growing profile of the women's team. And wouldn't that be awesome in the long-term future for the women's team to challenge the men's team in terms of which one means more to the fabric, not just of our sport, but the fabric of our nation. So you can know, Daisy, that we're working really hard on gender equality. We're making really good progress, but we've got a long way to go. And we'd love to see gender equality in all areas of cricket. Hopefully, one day in the future, you're sitting here as a member of the media or a lawyer or someone else, and the CEO of Cricket Australia at that time is a woman. And you can ask them a question like that. Hopefully that doesn't happen in a few months' time, but a few years it'd be okay. So we really want to do that, Daisy. And again, if I can urge everyone to come and join us and be part of us trying to set a world record on the 8th of March next year, International Women's Day. The world record crowd for a women's sporting event anywhere in the world is about 92,000 at a FIFA Women's World Cup final. We're going to break that next year on the 8th of March if you're all there with us, with your family and friends. So that'll be a big step in the right direction, Daisy, if we can do that.
Will you consider more Test cricket for women? The players clearly want it. Your predecessor thought that the level that's there now is the right level. There is clearly a format to play all 3 in a series that's modelled on the Ashes. Will you consider more Test cricket for your women?
It's something that we wouldn't close our minds to in the mid to long term, Gerard. I think, though, the T20 format, the 50-over format are such important parts of the women's game, and they're going so well. And we need to consider the capacity of various nations outside Australia and England and, emerging nations such as India in the women's game. We need to consider the right time, the right nature of formats to be playing. So I think it's right. I agree with James, as who you mentioned. I agree with James that it's about right. We shouldn't rule anything out in the future, but in saying that, there wouldn't be a lot to be gained if you see Australia dominate a fringe nation in a test match versus playing a really close T20 match. That's going to be better for the development, not just of the women's game, but of the sport as a whole.
Who has the conch?
Ken Davis from Clifton Consulting. In the interest of full disclosure, East Malvern Cricket Club, just a couple of 100 metres up Gardeners Creek from Glen Iris. And I'm wearing the Premiership shirt, worn 7 times, washed twice, so I'm travelling.
Same as my shirt today, Ken.
Yeah. Also, in the interest of full disclosure, I represent Dukes in Australia. What is the latest thinking of CA with 3 months Kookaburra, 3 months Dukes, and also the results of the testing of the balls you've done at Queensland University, which I completed a couple of weeks ago? Will the results be made public?
Yeah, so what a good question. With or without your Dukes hat on, Ken, and congratulations on the premiership too. But I'm not so happy with your club because last time I had a hit, I tore my hammy coming back for a quick second at your home ground. But back onto cricket balls, given that we've got Chatham House rules here, I'll suggest that anyway.
No, actually we don't. Just those cameras at the back, it's going straight to the news.
I was suggesting that. So we're about to make an announcement about the ball standards that we've developed. We've done a lot of testing with the University of Queensland across a range of cricket balls from Dukes, Kookaburra, Steed and Platypus, various other brands from various other parts of the world. And so for the first time ever, we'll have a cricket ball standard that will help clubs make decisions on and associations to make decisions on appropriate balls to be used in their competition. In the absence of that ball standard, we've really had associations and clubs flying blind and working with opinion as to whether a particular ball is of sufficient quality for their competition, or in fact whether it might be over-engineered for their competition. Clearly you don't need the same quality playing under-10s cricket that you do playing Premier cricket, for example. So those ball standards will be published. There'll be a number of balls that have achieved those standards, and then associations and clubs will be better informed as to the appropriate balls for their particular need. As it relates to the elite level of domestic competition, to the other part of your question, Ken, I think we've got it about right. Who would have thought 10 or 20 years ago that we might end up with half the season played with one ball and half with another? Well, I think it's working pretty well, and particularly heading into an away Ashes, and that was part of the motivation. Another part of the motivation to be open was to open up the market as well, for the benefit of associations and clubs around the country. So I think it's working pretty well. Back when I played grade cricket, you often had the choice of balls. I don't think that's a bad thing either. I'm not flagging that we'll move to that, but it worked really well. Based on the conditions, you might, back in those days, you might have gone for the Kookaburra ball or the Platypus ball as it was, or whatever else was accredited at the time. But what we didn't have were the ball standards in place that we've got now. So it's a really informative tool that will frankly highlight the great quality of your balls. And they are fantastic quality. They make you want to be a fast bowler when you put a Duke's ball in your hand. Kookaburra, to their credit, have had a real uplift in their quality over the last couple of years. And the other thing, or the other benefit of the standards, is that a bunch of other brands will now have an objective measure that shows that they're up to the task, and the cricket community can choose them rather than just being limited to a Kookaburra ball or a Duke's ball.
Couple more, Russ.
Kevin, Russell Gould from the Herald Sun. Just scaling back to the reintegration of Dave and Steve into the team, I'm just wondering what level of personal involvement you had with the planning of that, and also meeting with the players, and on that, what your opinion is of whether they accept the gravity of what they did, the potential to change, and the need to accept those new levels of what you've already expressed the Australian team stands for.
G'day, Russ. Thanks for that. When we had the board meeting in Sydney a couple of weeks ago, I caught up with Dave and Steve up there in person. That's the last time or the most recent time that I caught up with them. I'm really impressed with all three of the sanctioned players in terms of what they've done over the last 12 months and how they've grown, all in different ways, different directions, different circumstances. You've got, for example, Dave Warner as a family man with a wife and two daughters. Steve married to Danny without any kids, and Cam as a young single guy. So very different stages of life, very different life experience outside cricket. So naturally, they've all, I guess, responded to the situation in their own individual way, just as any of us would with our own personalities and character, and have all grown. We have been running discussions, put simply, with the Australian men's squad. And as people would have seen in Dubai just last week, I think it was, we had Steve and Dave fly through on their way to the IPL to be part of discussions with the team around the standards that we're signing up to, whether that be as players or as leaders of the game or both in their case. And while I wasn't there in Dubai, those conversations went well. What I would say though is that last year, or the events of last year, were a huge upheaval, weren't they? And took a huge emotional toll on people inside cricket and some people who are proud Australians and value what cricket means to our culture. So a meeting in Dubai doesn't mean that everything's fixed and on we go, but what it does mean, it's a really positive step in bringing all of those players together and making sure that any remaining issues can be addressed so that we can, to Gerard's comment earlier, build on the harmony that's growing rather than disrupting it.
Last one from the floor.
Hi, Kevin. Chaminda Ranasinghe from RMIT. So
Hi, Chaminda.
Slightly different. Interestingly, you're talking about the IPL. We've obviously finished the BBL, which has been a fantastic season. Interestingly, obviously, IPL have all the stars, or at least the entertainment value through the stars are fantastic. Question around your thoughts about attracting those stars into the BBL, BCCI's, thinking about their own players and just interested in how the BCCI is handling it, your views about next season for our own game, and the entertainment value that those players will bring.
Yeah, thanks, Chaminda. If you go back to some of the commentary in the public domain around the new year, maybe early in the new year, there were a lot of suggestions that, the great talent of international cricket is off playing the Bangladesh League or the Pakistan League. Prior to that, they were going to go and play in the UAE League, which never eventuated. And we're really conscious that any league that's played around the world has to respect the players and the playing talent that they're looking to attract. It's very easy for someone in the UAE or anywhere else in the world to say, we're going to pay you 200 or 300 or 400 grand US to play in this tournament. Then they've got to run away and work out how to fund it. And in that case, they couldn't. And we don't want a situation in cricket as we've had with the Indian Champions League of years gone by, or was it the Indian Cricket League? It's the ICL. In any case, where players still haven't been paid for playing, 10 years ago. And if you looked at the playing lists, and they're obviously publicly available, look at the playing lists of the Bangladesh League and the Pakistan League and say, okay, that rich pool of talent in each of those, who would we love to have in the BBL that we didn't? You could count them on one hand very, very comfortably. And that's not to disrespect those players. They're really good players. And we would embrace them in the BBL. But there's not many who are the world-class players like an AB de Villiers. There's one name on that list where you'd say we'd love AB to be playing here. Absolutely we would. But a lot of the other players running around in those leagues being paid $50,000 US, they're not going to make or break a BBL. If you can bear with me for a minute sharing a couple of stats. So the WBBL this season, everyone loved it, right? We had a sold-out final at Drummoyne Oval. The BBL copped some criticism. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't quite loved as much as previous years. There was talk about too many games and what have you, but the BBL only expanded to match the same number of games as the WBBL and of the IPL. So I look at that evidence, a couple of buckets of evidence, and say, I'm confident there's not too many matches. Can we schedule them better and differently? Absolutely we can. We can learn from our mistakes this year. Why did people love the WBBL and not quite love the BBL so much? In the WBBL, there were 39 innings where teams scored more than 150. We know that the fans love high-scoring T20 cricket. And 39 innings of 150 or more in the WBBL was more than the last 3 years combined. That's a big reason why people love the WBBL more. Contrast that with the BBL. this year we had 23% of matches where both teams scored over 150. Because the other thing that we love, other than high-scoring matches in BBL cricket, is close matches. And in the last 2 years prior to that, we've had over half of the BBL matches where both teams scored more than 150. So I put it to you that it's not the be-all and end-all, but the number of 150 is critical in the success of a 2020 cricket league, be it a WBBL or a BBL.
Kevin, thank you. One, as we finish, if you could have but one wish for 2019 and you're only allowed one, are you defending the World Cup or are you retaining the Ashes?
Oh, surely we can get greedy, Gerard. If we have a crack at one and we don't quite get there, we can have a crack at the other, can't we? Look, I think the World Cup is in that format, clearly the pinnacle of the game, but we've not won an away Ashes since 2001, is that right? 2001, Gideon, away Ashes. Grant Poulter, the stats guru of Cricket Australia, nodding as well. Thanks, GP. So to win an away Ashes series for the first time since 2001 would be so special. But how do you split it? Surely we can, after the year we've had, surely we can get greedy and have a crack at both, hey?
I sense the room. The correct answer was the Ashes. Maybe Mark can finish this off. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please thank Kevin Roberts?
So thank you very much, Kevin. It's very pleasing to see your backpack is sitting here down the front with the Cricket Australia logo proudly displayed to the room. Everyone should come and take a photograph of that. Thank you for your excellent speech. Thank you for answering the tough questions, and thank you for being here today. I think especially thank you for all you've done to get our great game back on track, and best wishes for the work still to be done. And also to Gerard, thank you very much. I know this is an extremely busy time of year for you. We're most grateful for you taking the time to come and be with us today and to ask all those tough questions on our behalf. Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for coming today, and hope to see you at another Melbourne Press Club event sometime soon. Thank you.